like have a cache of things.
Hit the button. Hit the button.
Okay.
Oh,
so-
hello.
Hi.
Sorry, we were having some technical difficulties pressing buttons on our end, but I think everything is okay. So hello, we're nerds. Welcome to our official Preptober, first chat of Preptober. Are any of you going to be in or participating in NaNo? And I say that if you're watching this, leave us in the comments. But are anybody on screen going to be participating in NaNo this year? 1, 2,
I'm excited.
Now I have to. If everyone's doing it, now I have to.
Peer pressure.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody to our brainstorming chat. There's so many things to talk about brainstorming, and we've said so much in the past. So we're gonna try and keep this fun and fresh, and talk about where we get our ideas from and how to properly outline some stuff. And I think we'll have a great time. So we'll grab a beverage of some kind and settle in. This does look like swamp water, but it's green tea. It's on camera. It looks a little gross.
Tequila. Just a glass.
I'm this close from tequila today, so.
It's not. It's water. Just in case anyone was like, "Oh my god."
If anyone didn't know you, I guess.
Yeah.
Way to brainstorm.
Like, my God.
All right, we got some people in the comments. So, Kelly is in the comments as well, and she says that she's doing NaNo. Fantastic.
Yes.
Looks like Joe Catherine is also doing NaNo, and Vanessa is also doing NaNo. Maybe Ann Griswold is doing NaNo. Fantastic. Oh my gosh, so many people here.
Yes.
Hooray.
Nice.
I'm really excited for NaNo this year. I've had this like idea in my head for a really long time, like over a year. So I'm excited to write it.
So when you brainstorm, how did you do that? How did you come up with that idea that you've been thinking of for so long?
How did I get this idea? I really love the show The Haunting of Hill House, and I've always wanted to write something that felt like that. And so then I'm not sure what happened. You know, if you look at lots of things as avenues for inspiration, I think eventually your brain just kind of gets wired for it. And so I just one day I was like, what if they were like baking in Hill House? And just went from there.
I think that's actually like a good thing to, I think of too when it comes to brainstorming, of somebody, like when someone says like, I'm going to brainstorm, it's someone sitting down at a table with a blank pen and paper going, let me think of the story. And like, that's definitely not how brainstorming works. Like you're walking down the street and you think of an idea, so you put it in your phone, and then you're watching a TV show and you go, oh, I love that character, let me put that in. And then eventually like stuff starts percolating, and then that's when brainstorming happens.
Yeah.
So,
you know what inspired it? You thinking or saying that spurred my memory. It was possibly over a year ago. It was the year that the Great British Baking Show was in the bubble. And it was like the first time that they'd ever all been brought to this one venue, and they were all there for weeks and weeks. And I was like, you know what would suck if the venue was Hill House?
It was also haunted as well as the plague. Sure,
Yeah.
let's make it worse.
And it's
imagine
evolved
like a
from
ghost
there.
turning off the oven halfway through and being like, are you kidding me?
Again.
No baking for you.
Like,
So many good baking/ghost puns to be had, I feel like.
I'm sure I'm gonna need to do a brainstorming session just pun
Yeah,
themed.
just for the pun.
Yeah.
100%.
there's also a few more people in the comments. Misty and Headphone Books are both doing NaNo. Fantastic.
Nice.
Great. I am unfortunately not doing NaNo because I signed myself up for a couple of projects in October. So actually, now that I think about it, only one of them is for October and the other one is longer. So maybe I will end up doing it later. We'll see. We'll see.
Peer pressure.
No promises, but we'll see. Joe said the ghost of a keto dieter is constantly hiding the flour.
Died of want of calories.
Well, we can talk about something brainstorming that we do in our writing group that I believe we are
Yeah.
planning to do Tuesday.
Tuesday.
This is something that Megan started. It's affectionately referred to as Unhinged PowerPoint Brainstorm.
Yes.
It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like.
What's on the label?
Yeah. I do think that this is something that if you're feeling really, really stuck, just trying to put what you have into a PowerPoint format, whether or not you show it to someone, is extremely helpful. Because it really forces you to like, well, if I was to introduce this idea to someone, what would be important and what am I missing? So like I've been making my PowerPoint and it's like, well, I've got a lot of vibes and I've got a bunch of characters, most of whom are not on page. So like, oh, what am I missing? I'm missing a climax. I'm going to need to brainstorm what we're building to, you know? It's great fun.
Good idea. I thought I haven't done one yet. I've just been witness to these incredible displays of.
Do it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it because I'm about to turn. I have like till midnight tonight to turn in my edits, and then I get to brainstorm tomorrow. So I'm like.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is tomorrow you can make your PowerPoint, and then Tuesday.
Yes.
Yeah. PowerPoint.
I think that might be the case. So if I can figure out PowerPoint, because I'm like a.
You can do Google Slides.
Yeah. Do Google
Okay.
Slides.
Yeah. Super easy. Okay.
Yes.
Good to know.
It
I also don't know if you know this, but we're not going for like production quality here.
Okay.
Oh, I'm going for production.
I did figure
Megan's going
that.
for
I
production.
did. Yeah. Yeah.
Mine somewhat deliberately look like not cute.
Mine are not normally as cute as they're going to be this time. I downloaded a template that would fit my hotel's theme. It's a hotel that was built in the 70s. So,
Nice.
yeah, great fun. Highly recommend making a PowerPoint.
Yeah, brainstorming with other people is one of my like top 10 tier activities. I definitely enjoy, and like the wilder it gets, the better. So I like starting out with like something that's kind of just the most vague sort of idea, and then you can just get sort of really nuts and spitball ideas and, you know, throw things back and forth. It doesn't even have to make sense, but like as long as it's fun. And then usually it turns into something that's actually good, because the first ideas I start off with, I always think are good, and then someone else will be, well, what if it's this instead of that? And it's like, oh, that's so much better. It's never the first idea I come up with. I have to like have a sounding board and go back and forth with it.
Yeah. I also love the questions people will ask when you're trying to explain to them your idea. You know, when you're in the brainstorming phase, you'll be like, oh, and the main character will fake her way onto a baking show. And someone will be like, well, how?
Like,
I don't
dare
know.
you make me think about that.
That's her problem, not my problem.
Yeah.
Or they'll ask a question that's like, oh, I don't know anything about the whole entire magic system.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's a perpetual one in
Yeah.
the group.
Yep.
It's also fun because you can kind of see like what people latch onto really early. So like the first time I did this was for this like fantasy rom-com that like also like when I went to make the PowerPoint, I'm like, I have no idea what this is going to be. And actually in the process, kind of like Megan said, of making the PowerPoint, realized I kind of had more ideas and more cohesive ideas than I thought I did. But one of the things like I was trying to think for this like, you know, kind of rivals to lovers romance, like what's their shared interest? I wanted them to have a shared interest. And I just kind of like off the cuff came up with like magic archaeology. And that was something that like Megan and Aaron were both like excited about. So it's something that I like built in a lot more to the plot because it's, and like since then when I pitched that, it's always been something that people have been like, oh, that sounds interesting. So it's a good way to kind of like gauge like what people are going to be excited about early on and maybe lean into that or do more of that if people are excited.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was recently at a book event with a bunch of other authors, and I think I was the only person at the table that hadn't written a book. But of course, they're like, "So, do you have any ideas?" I'm like, "I don't know, like sort of. Maybe I'll do." They're like, "Well, pitch it to us." And I was like, okay, so maybe this one, and they're
No
like,
pressure.
okay, yeah. I'm like, wait, this one. They're like, okay, and I was like, maybe this one. They're like, do that one. That one sounds good. Do that one. Okay, great. Yeah, I can lean into that one. Sounds good.
Yeah. There's nothing more inspiring to me in the brainstorming phase than someone being like, I like that.
Mhm.
I was just looking at the last PowerPoint one that I did, which is for the vampire novel that is so close to done with revisions. And it had just important details, which was just what different kinds of vampires were. And then it had every character, even though some didn't have names. So one was Catherine Hahn and one was Unnamed Handsome Man. And like, oh, here's kind of what the climax is going to be. And then just, please help me come up with a plot. That was the final slide.
Just help me.
Yeah, my like main problem when it comes to writing that I always need help with is that I can come up with like one part of a book and then I need help filling in the rest of it. So I'll just have like, I have a note or like a doc that's just like, here's some names, here's some places, here's some random plot threads, here's whatever. And I don't ever think, I always think that there's something separate. So I need somebody to be like, could you combine those two things? Or could you
always,
yeah,
every
and
single
that's
time.
the moment where like, oh, that, yeah, sure, okay, great.
I'm curious, actually, this is something I'm struggling with right now, but if you all have any tips for when you have a lot of components and you need to make them into one plot.
I usually, I mean, this isn't like a clear solution, but when I feel like that, like I call that my brain is scattered. You know what I mean? I'm like, I have 50 good ideas, but I don't know how to make them cohesive. And I'll sit down and like kind of draw like a mind map out, if that makes sense. Like I have to start putting it on a physical page. And that's when I start like doodling and I'm drawing stick people and I'm drawing terrible buildings and houses, and something about that, having all these ideas written down and like sometimes horribly drawn out on the page, helps to make them, I don't know, it's like seeing them in a different form and I can kind of start piecing things together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's usually when I bust out the note cards now. Like before, the note cards were like really important in my strategy of like building, you know, from idea to like actual like structure. But I think now it's when I get stuck, that's kind of when I take like, hey, I think these two things are going to fit well together, but how do I get them to fit together? Especially when they're different enough that it's not clear, like straight up front. That's where like those note cards come in. I list out scenes, generally what's happening in there, and then just kind of like, let's puzzle piece them together a couple different times.
I love the idea of doing something like this, maybe in the future, if we have a chat that we haven't filled in yet, like coming up with a bunch of separate ideas and having fun with them, like mixing and matching and seeing like if we could do that live. Like, how would these two things that are totally different fit together? How would you make that a story thing? Like, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a good commercial story idea. It would just be something that like, this is the way we stitch things together. Could be kind of fun at some point to do.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
I think also you can kind of approach it from like a character arc standpoint where like, you know, like, I don't know. And I guess I'm thinking of like the scenarios that your components are like, you have a bunch of different characters. But if for each of those characters, you know, like this is what this character wants, then the climax is just like, how is this event going to throw a wrench in everybody's plan?
Yeah. How dare you tell me something so obvious that I haven't thought of at all?
Yep.
That's uncalled for.
So we know Kaylin uses note cards and I use crazy mind maps. Does anyone use anything else? Or
I've used Scapple before, and I really enjoy Scapple. It's just a digital mind map. I used that with my vampire book last year, and it was really nice for when you want kind of a tangled web of people Like, oh, I want everyone to kind of know each other, and you don't even realize at first how much people know each other.
Yes, I love that.
Mm.
I'm trying to do that with the one that I want to plot out this month. And I'm already like, I'm brainstorming in like a thick notebook, and I already know that I have to discipline myself enough to do what I never do, and that is to keep a scene Bible, or not a scene Bible. I have to like keep a character Bible. Like, this person's eyes are blue and his are brown and he's named this and his partner is this. Because I want to do that where it's like everyone has a secret for one thing, and everybody, so a lot of people know each other, and then they don't say they know each other. And so, yeah, with that type of thing where it's like a little more intricate, yeah, I'm like, not only is my notebook I'm going to scribble in like my brainstorming book, it's also going to like double as my character Bible so that I can keep everybody's drama straight in my head. Scrapple, note card.
Kelly has a good comment in there too. I think this is really what I've been kind of holding on to as my method for the past like 2 years, because I haven't actually written as much as I wanted to. But Kelly said that Kelly tries to hold it all in their brain and then use whatever doesn't fall out. So it's like, essentially, it's like, okay, if you remember it, then it's good enough. But if you don't really remember it as much, is it good enough to pursue?
I will
idea?
I think that's
that.
great for early stages.
I was going to say, I will do that in early stages, like Megan said, because yes, there's something to be said for like, if the idea sticks around long enough, you really want to write it, and you'll therefore be able to sit through months and months and months of writing and revision and not hate it. Well, you'll still hate it, but you won't hate it as much. And on the other hand, if I tried to do that all the way through the process, it would be a disaster, because my brain is like a Teflon, nothing sticks. So it's not good.
I think one of the great things about that method, especially if you have enough time to let your ideas sit in there, it's kind of hard if you're, it's prepped over and you're doing it all in October. But if you give yourself more time, I think one of the great things about that is that your brain kind of just works on it in the background.
Mm-hmm.
You like see something and you're like, oh, that would go great with that idea. And it gives you time to work around the first idea you had. Like, oh, I thought this was great, but now I've had some time and I've realized this would be even better.
I swear that like part of it for me is just like I kind of come up with like a base idea, and like while I'm churning it over, like you said, it's like whatever music I'm listening to, I'll like latch on. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna infuse this. I'm gonna do like so the amount of like Taylor Swift inspiration is, and it's not usually like overt. It's just like I'm like listening to a song, like, oh, this is a breakup song. I want to like include this element of the breakup, or like,
Yeah, the first book that I ever queried that did well when I queried it, it was a NaNo book. I changed the idea on like the 5th day of NaNo because I heard the line, "Darling, I'm a nightmare dressed like a daydream" for the first time in my life. And I was like, wow, let's run with this. So shout out to Taylor Swift for that. And she's thrown a real wrench in things, having a new album come out a week before NaNo.
That's like literally in my PowerPoint that I will be presenting on Tuesday. There's
Midnights
a warning
could
slide.
change this.
Yeah, so it's slide number 2, just like a big red, like warning.
Speaking of music, one of the other things I was going to ask is like, everyone knows that when you brainstorm on the internet, you go to Pinterest and then you like look through all these aesthetic boards, but like what's another either website or like venue that you use to brainstorm your stuff? That's not just like, oh, an idea and I wrote it down. Like, where do you go to like actively brainstorm?
Ooh,
Good question.
Since I was just talking about music, I think mine is actually Spotify a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really, because I do like use that, like, I heard a lyric in a song and it makes me, think this. And then it's like kind of nice because I do listen to it usually while I am writing. I think the YA I'm currently, pending whether Midnights changes this, the YA contemporary I'm thinking about writing is like very, very angsty. So like last night I actually just went through, like I found my playlists from high school. I found my Sad Girl High School playlist.
Yes.
And so I was just like kind of like listening to those songs of like, ooh, this one fits, and it's like, I know this is gonna get me so in the zone to write this angsty female high school character. So for me, I think one of my big ones early on is like actually Spotify.
Especially if you already have like just a general vibe, because I know like visual media like Pinterest will get you where you need to go, but I think music is so important for me in the beginning. It's because I got the vibe, then I try to find the music that's going to fit with that vibe, and then it's just kind of shut the world out for a little bit, put your headphones in, and just kind of listen to it and see. Like, usually what I like to do is totally involuntary, it just kind of happens, is that my brain tries to picture like, if this song was like the trailer for this book, what would happen? And then I just try to picture these characters going through something crazy, jump cuts and all. My brain does not leave those out, but I think it's really important to kind of find the music that fits that vibe and then just revisit that, because that's the quickest way I can jump back into something that I'm writing if I haven't messed with it for a little while.
Yeah. I think for me, I am not the most like visual writer when I'm doing a first draft. I don't picture things super easily. And so when I'm in the brainstorming session, I specifically try to consume media that has the same vibe that I'm going for. So in prepping to write this book, which I know I want to feel similar to Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House, I have watched it probably twice, all episodes probably twice in the last couple weeks, not just because I want to be inspired by it, but also because I'm getting closer and I don't want to accidentally be like too inspired by it. Like making sure that the ideas I've come up with aren't accidentally like the same. Because sometimes you get removed from a thing and then you go back later and you're like, crap, like I was just thinking of that thing. So like making sure that my characters aren't too similar.
That's interesting that you do that, because like I feel people are told to like not rewatch or like do that, because then you'll get the idea and you'll copy them. But the fact that you like go in and like actively watch it to be like same vibe, but like cannot have the same.
Yeah, I want it to make me feel the same, but I don't want it to be the same. So,
well, and it's always interesting too how like, if you are sort of actively aware of like where your inspiration is and trying to like avoid being too on the nose about it, how you can like just make some interesting choices. So I had one that I was writing like a very Kaz Brecker-esque character, which I'm sure will surprise anyone who knows me. But like, so I was like thinking of these ways. I'm like, okay, I know he's similar in X, Y, and Z ways. What are some ways that he's going to be like a very different character? And so even just something small, like Kaz Brecker has like a very scratchy voice, is how he's described, at least in the books. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to flip that. And this character is going to have like a very like soothing, charismatic voice that is like also going to be kind of like creepy, because he's not a charming, soothing character. But and that ended up being though something that I really liked and something I was able to do because I was like consciously aware of how I wanted to be different than the inspiration.
Yeah. And I think there's a really big difference between like, oh, I want this to feel the same and I want this to be the same, It's like you want that character to feel the way that you felt reading Kaz Brecker. You don't want that character to be Kaz Brecker,
Kaz Brecker is already Kaz Brecker.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm never going to be able to write anything like Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House, but I want to feel similarly. And one of the things that's nice when it's a piece of media really well, you can kind of like see what's happening, but your brain can be elsewhere. So I got this notebook for this project. And like I just had it next to me. And if I thought of something while I was kind of zoning out while this was on, I just like write it down really quick. Like, oh, let's think about who possible points of view could be. Let's think about like, this made me feel dread in this way. I didn't realize I was afraid of that. like, let's write down that fear because it's horror, you know?
I think there's also something to be said for rewatching or rereading a project or something that inspired you, because you're reminding yourself of the moments you had, the things that like actually inspired you and made you want to write that thing. Like sometimes it will be something as simple as I thought this was the way the story was going and it didn't. And I want to take that and make something similar that does go the way that I wanted it to. And if I reread that, I'll be like, this was the moment where I had that, like, oh my God, this is happening. Like, how can I replicate that in a different way? So I do think it is good, like, to go back and read it, not from the point of view as a reader necessarily, but like somebody who's studying writing, essentially.
For sure. And looking for points of access in the things that inspire you, that it's like, oh, I would have liked to see more of that. So like something I wrote down was like, oh, we don't ever see them on the plane. They get on a plane and fly across the country to go to their sister's funeral. And like, that's, you know, going on a trip because someone has died is a very long trip. And just like, oh, that would be, I could play with that. I would like to do that. And just like writing it down because like, oh, I would have liked to see that. But I didn't. So now I can write it.
Right. It's kind of like you get so fully immersed in what that project is that you're able to pull those pieces out that it's like, hey, I would like to have seen something more elaborate done. And then that then again leads to different ideas and different, you know, platforms.
Or like, how would this
work.
look with my characters?
There's some interesting things in the comments as well. First of all, Andrew joined us and said that she is also doing NaNo. Amazing.
Yeah.
And then Emmy said that they sketch ideas instead of wording them so that they're a bit more open-ended. And I love that idea. I'm just a terrible artist. So
Yeah, same.
I don't know if
You
I
don't
don't know
have to
what's
be
going on in that frame, but
When I'm drawing out my little things, it is like I do. I'm not necessarily
I've
sketching
seen your
the
drawings.
ideas.
They're way better than mine.
Those are not the drawings that I'm sketching out, though. Like these are frantic stick figures with no faces, and it's horrifying. But yeah, I definitely don't think you need to be able to draw to like scratch out stick figures and basically be like, here's these characters, then they walk all the way over here, and this is the temple they're going to, and then or like even doing like little maps, you know what I mean? So you can picture how the story is unfolding and kind of get inspired from there. So yeah, I love the idea of sketching as a part of your note-taking / brainstorming inspiration.
Probably great for setting, which is something I'm notoriously awful at.
I was just gonna say, I think the only thing I've ever actually sketched out was maybe like the layout of the house, because like the house had like a really important, it was a setting that was frequent. So I was like, I was constantly being like, wait, that room wasn't there before and now it's there. So I think I sketched out like one floor of a house before. But
sorry, go ahead, Rachel. I was gonna say my drawings are probably horrified if anyone horrifying if you stumble across it without context, because like literally yesterday I was trying to figure out like the magic system, and I was drawing like a little stick figure and then was like, this is a stick figure, this is his soul inside of the stick figure, this is a soul outside of a stick figure, this guy is dead. like if anyone sees these scary ghosts,
like, what child is being haunted right now?
What child is drawing these? The one in the horror movie you always watch.
One of the lies I always tell myself when I'm planning a horror novel is like, oh, I can make this vague because it's horror. Like, I don't need a layout for my hotel because it's horror. It can feel big. And nothing gets called out faster in a brainstorming session than, oh, it's vague on purpose.
The corridors just keep moving around and nobody knows where anything is. It's fine. Just ignore it.
Yeah. Brainstorming partners do not ignore it.
Yeah. I don't know. How are you guys planning on starting your brainstorming process? I'm kind of feeling all over the place.
Well, I do like pre-plotting flashes for my books where it's like I'm settled enough in my premise that I'm ready to have something in writing. And I started this September 14th. I wrote a date on it. Way to go past me. And that's just like, I'll have it next to me and I'll just jot down things. It's like, oh, now I am more intensely thinking about the idea. And we're going to do a PowerPoint this week. And then after the PowerPoint, I think I'll probably move to note cards because I do really like to plot. I am my most successful in NaNo when I plot a lot. So
same.
Yeah, I don't think I could ever not plot. Like I need something.
Yeah.
At least
Kyra
the first
just
couple.
Kyra's in the corner making faces.
I'm not making faces.
The resident pantser over here. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. At what point do you guys in your plotting process, in your brainstorming process, actually sit down and start plotting and like writing out scene cards? Because I feel like, I mean, I guess this question is not for Kyra. But
I
for
have
me,
like
it
a
feels
big
different.
outline of events sometimes.
Okay, sometimes.
Ooh, Jada said, I love the app, the Brainstormer. Tell me
What is
more. I'm
that?
interested.
I think the point in time when you decide to actually start like writing out and building out the plot, it's going to be different for each project. I think it depends. I think like the vibe needs to be there. And like, I only really just committed to doing NaNo, but I think I know what project I'm working on. And like right off the top of my head, I know that there's a podcast, there's a subreddit that I can go to. I don't know how I would search on Pinterest for it just yet. But that's usually like 3 different areas where like I'm going to go and just try to consume a bit of it and get in that headspace. And then maybe hit up Pinterest. And then once I have like characters fleshed out, I think that's when I try to throw them into situations. I think the characters for me need to come first.
Interesting. It's funny because I was literally thinking about this morning without even like fully remembering that we're doing this for a chat. But like, I think one of the issues for me is that I will often get too excited in the brainstorming process and actually want to start plotting out sooner than I should, I think, because like I was complaining about this to the writing group the other day, so they've heard it all, but like I end up having to rewrite books a lot, and I'm like, maybe it's part of my process, but also I frigging hate it because it takes so much time. And like that's one of the, I like literally just had to ask my editor for an extension on like literally what was supposed to be the first delivery of the rough draft, and that's terrible and I hate it. But it was because I had to rewrite the entire book. And I was thinking about this morning and I was like, I think it's because I get too excited about brainstorming because I love brainstorming. I love that part of things. It's my favorite part. And then I go from brainstorming to plotting too quickly. And then I will be halfway through writing it, or sometimes in this case, all the way through writing it, and still sort of be half stuck in brainstorming mode. And then I will have a better idea. And then I have to go back and write that better idea into the book and sometimes change the whole book. And that is really biting me in the ass. So I think I'm just starting to realize like, maybe I need to extend the brainstorming time and like force myself not to write. Maybe that will be like all of October for me. Maybe I will force myself.
Yeah.
Cheers to you, Tiffany.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a little different with every book because, you know, like a year passes and you're just a different person and, you know, you try new things. For the last book I wrote, that I think the drafting process was as seamless as drafting gets for someone who hates drafting. I thought about it for a long, long time. And then I kind of on note cards just did the barest bones of like, okay, this is where I'm starting. This is going to be my midpoint. This is where I'm ending. And once I had those down a little bit, then I started looking at it in an act, like a 3-act setting. I think I did that one 3-act. It might have been 4. I don't know. It's all the same. Don't come for me. I know it's not exactly the same, but and I actually wrote out every single scene, like a 1-paragraph summary, and then I just for the first half. And I read every single one to my spouse, who was very long suffering and asked a lot of really great questions. That honestly, it helped a lot. And so I did it for the second half of the book after I made some adjustments based on questions asked. And yeah, that book was still messy, but I do think my plot was a lot cleaner. And so
the shape
I know
of it stayed the same. You mean like
yeah.
It's the important part.
And it got reworked, so it was a second draft plot, even if the text was first draft.
I really liked that idea, what you said about doing like the first act first and then going through it and making sure like, does this work? Asking questions. Because that's something that I really want to start doing. And then you plotting out the second act or what have you. After you've figured out the issues before you go ahead and plot the rest. So
yeah. Because I do love plotting, but I don't love to feel boxed in. Like, oh, I've spent all this time coming up with an entire plot, and now you're telling me that something in chapter 2 is messed up. Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Now it's time to change the whole thing. Kayla Amanda says, I basically always start my books too early and have to rewrite the first act. Yeah, that's exactly. Except in my case, I charge ahead and write much more of it than I should, and then it's often way more than the first act, which really sucks.
Nicole follows that up, says also that they get to an exciting point and think, wait, is this the inciting incident and not those other 4,000 words?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have trouble pacing like when stuff's going to happen. And then, like, what is my inciting incident? And then I have to cut and rearrange. And then it's just, I don't know. I'm also somebody who pantses a lot, and I'm trying to not do that. So maybe if that's true. Yeah, I know.
If we want to actually talk about, because like I absolutely would consider myself a pantser, but it's chaotic, but it's not like there's like a bit of a method to the madness. So I can talk a little bit about like how I make pantsing sort of work for me, and I think it's what I'm going to describe is probably going to sound very familiar to like the flashlight method, where for me a lot of it is like sort of discovery along the way. But I found that like kind of what I like to know going into actually writing the book and like going into NaNo is I like to know who my characters are. And I like to know like what is it that they want, what is it that they're struggling with. And have kind of an idea of like what their character arc is. Like maybe not even know what the climax is, but just like I know this character is struggling with X. By the end, I want them to have learned this or that or whatever. So I kind of have like the very broad strokes that way. And then a lot of times as I'm like, talking about these characters and like listening to my playlist and whatever, I start like sort of populating themes that I don't necessarily plot out. There's at no point in my process for most of the books I write ever like a list of like, these are the scenes and the order they're going to happen in and whatever. But I kind of just keep them in the back of my mind and have them almost like playbook moves that I can call on, if that makes sense. So for example, maybe I'll be writing like a romance and I'll know some things are going to happen at some point. Like this character is going to have to break up with their girlfriend and they're going to have this interaction. And then like, so these are all things that like I know are plot points that can exist. That then as I'm writing, I kind of start wherever I start. Sometimes that's the right place and sometimes it's something I fix in revisions. And then I just kind of keep going through, and then like it's kind of like what's interesting, what can be happening right now that's interesting to me. And some of that again ends up getting cut, but a lot of times it ends up being like pretty interesting and spurring ideas later on. And then like if I get stuck, I pull out one of these like plot points that I kind of have stored away and say, okay, you know, something needs to happen here. This is when this breakup is going to happen or whatever. And then like but then as I'm like building, you know, the stuff I'm writing can kind of then get built into the plot points I haven't used yet. So then by the end, it sometimes comes together. And I'm like, this is a chaotic, messy process. I've had wildly different results in terms of like the end product. So I've had first drafts that like, I've had one first draft that came out very, very clean. I had one that came out relatively clean and I just like had a medium amount of like revisions. And then I've had them come out where I like rewrote the book 3 times. So mileage varies, but that's kind of how I've gone about it. And just like, it is pantsing. There's no like outline written down, but pantsing in a way that like you kind of have some structure to fall back on.
Yeah.
I like that idea a lot. I'm going to file that away for when I start writing.
And when in doubt, I just like set something on fire. Not like always literally, but
But sometimes.
literally.
I definitely thought you meant like something like outside of the story and was like, excuse you.
They commit arson.
When in doubt, I just
Commit
set the
arson.
coffee shop on fire and it's fine.
No, but that is like an actual like, if things are bad or if things are getting boring, then I need to make them worse for the characters, and I just like find something that's gonna like F up their day. And sometimes that's like something in the book is on fire. Or one of my other favorite moves is awkward family dinner.
I love awkward family dinner.
Yeah, and I've noticed I actually use that. So awkward family dinner is like with your family, with your character's family, or like, you know, maybe it's their group of friends, or, you know, you get a group of characters together eating and having a conversation that like all of the character dynamics that are like tension come out to play, and you just kind of play through, see how that plays out, you know, when everybody's in the room with all their issues, eating a meal and talking about it. But I have noticed that like that's something I like to include, just because a lot of times there's a lot of like good conflict, good tension, good comedic value sometimes, but it also can be like a good way to like unstick the plot a little bit, is to get everyone in the room and talking about their issues, and sometimes making the issues worse. So
Yes, I love an awkward family dinner too, where multiple people have different goals with the dinner. Like, oh, the parent wants the kid at the dinner table so that they can talk about their life, but the kid is, you know, hunting monsters at school, and so they're thinking about that. And you know, someone unexpected gets invited who they weren't accounting for. You know, just like, how many things can I throw at this to just really ruin the night? And it's great when you're pantsing, because you've got a lot of threads at that point, and it's really great to get them all together.
yeah. So those are sort of like playbook moves for pantsers. if you're stuck, make things worse for your characters, or awkward family dinner. Awkward family dinner sometimes also makes things worse for your characters if it's awkward enough. You're not a coward about it.
Wow.
Just kidding.
Jada also mentioned earlier the app Plotter, Plottr, which we had not brought up yet, but I do love that app.
I've never seen it before. I just pulled out the website and I'm like, I think this is where I'm going to start NaNo. Like Preptober is going to be in Plotter because it looks awesome. I'm an insufferable plotter. Like I'm beachy, structure it, and then I can tear it down and rearrange everything. And this looks like it's going to be my cup of tea. Yes.
It's really great. It's basically like, if you're familiar with Scrivener, it's basically like the corkboard function of Scrivener. You can have a bunch of different plot lines, or sometimes I'll do like the main plot and what's happening with each character. And then you can move them around, which is really nice. Yeah, it's great fun. Lots of colors.
So long.
Yeah, I like it a lot when I'm kind of in between, like if I'm a little stuck and I want to brainstorm something, but my hand has cramped because I've filled out 100 note cards already, but I just need to run through a bunch of things really quickly. I don't want to write down every possible scenario. I'll just look at a chunk in the plot and throw it all in Plotter and adjust until something looks good.
Try to get back on Plotter so I can remember what it even looks like. I think it would be really good for brainstorming because I don't necessarily I definitely like scribbling out, the random notes I think of on the fly or like my crazy stick figures. But if I'm gonna sit down and just like dump out a bunch of ideas, having a corkboard type setup like on Scrivener is a really good idea.
Yeah, and you can import your Plotter cards into Scrivener, I believe.
Yeah,
it's been a while, but I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure I've done it before.
You can export it to Word or Scrivener, which is pretty dope. But I like how you can have different timelines to where I feel like the corkboard in Scrivener is pretty limited.
Yeah, you can like
but
color
this is
code
very
them,
visual.
but
Yeah. It's just like a beefed up version of Scrivener's corkboard, right? For sure.
Yeah. This isn't really for like brainstorming, but I highly recommend once you have started drafting, you're like, yep, this is what I'm going with. Whether you've outlined a whole plot or if you've decided to pants and you have like the starting points. I highly recommend once you start writing, make yourself a little file, make yourself a Scrivener corkboard or a Plotter, just something where you have a couple sentences about what happens in each chapter. It will save you a lot of time in the future, or you can put it on your note cards. Because then if you are like me and you want to have those things in revisions, they're done. You don't have to do that again. It's been a very large time saver for me.
Great tip. There's also something in the comments that I want to talk about because I feel like I also need this advice. Nicole asked, what do you do with ideas that don't make it into your story but that you love? They also say that for her that those ideas never find their way into other stories and they wish they would. So yeah, like I have this problem too because I kind of have to sit with myself and be like, I don't need to include every single idea I've ever had ever into one manuscript. Like I can make multiple.
Unless
Yeah,
we could.
Yeah. So what do you guys do when you have like a really like fun little idea and you want to put it in something, but you just can't make it work?
I do write it down somewhere. I email myself a lot. Like I'll be like, oh my God, this idea is great when I'm out. And then I will email it to my inbox. And then every few weeks I'll sit down and just take all of those and put it in. Actually, it's right here because it's always hanging around. Like a little teeny book. I can carry it around with me too. And all of the ideas that I can't use on the spot go in there.
Yeah, I don't think I ever actually delete any scenes. So like if a scene doesn't fit in the book that I'm currently writing and I'm like, okay, this doesn't fit here, I'm not going to use it. I don't delete it. I actually have a Scrivener project that is purely for like deleted scenes that I actually really like that I want to use. It also has where like I put all my ideas in there. I have it backed up to like Dropbox, I think. So I'm not going to lose it because it's a pretty important file. But I think keeping it there and then like every once in a while, I'll skim through it and I'll pick out like, hey, this might fit into this project or this fits over here. So it's kind of like a graveyard of scenes that I haven't used yet.
Yeah, I have something similar. It's just a notes app, and it's where if I have any idea that could be summed up in a bullet point, I just put it in the notes app. And before I start every new project, I like scroll through, look at my idea graveyard. Maybe once a year I'll go in and delete stuff that it's like, oh, that's not as good as I thought it was. Or, I don't think I'm ever going to get to that. And I don't care that much about it anymore. That way it stays kind of fresh. But yeah, I just like to refresh before every new project and see. And sometimes you look at it and you realize like, oh, I could do this in a short story. I don't have to write a whole novel for this one thing that was really cool.
A lot of the time I will be able to use it though. Like even some things, obviously if it's a high fantasy and I'm like, oh, it'd be cool if this guy had a motorbike. probably not going to fit in nicely. But normally, even if it does seem a bit out there, I can find a way to fit it in. And again, that's not to say you should try to shove all of your ideas into the same manuscript, because that's what you do when you first start out. You kind of, jam all of it in there in the kitchen sink. But usually if you can make it fit in a way that works for your story, that's what I try to do if I'm excited about the idea.
Yeah, sometimes I try to think of like, if I'm going to put this in here, what's it adding? It's like, where's I just heard this the other day. It's like an architectural saying of like, the project's not done when you can't find anything more to add. It's done when you can't take anything else away. Yeah, so it's like, instead of like trying to keep building and like keep like messing with it, is like stop and like take steps back and like, what's the, like when does it work where you can't remove anything else? And so like that might be a good piece of advice for people who like overthink things too much.
Sure.
Or write way too long of books.
Yeah.
Or if it's like, oh, I just can't figure out how to fit it, but I just really think it would go well, like looking at what it is that's exciting about that idea. Like, is it the setting? Like, is there something you could pull from the idea that would be what you're actually excited about that would fit better?
Or even like change it so that it does fit into, the vibe of the story. Like, what is it that's not working and what is it that you like? Maybe you're not in love with the scene. Maybe you're in love with the vibe between two characters, and you can bring that into a different scene, that type of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's just like knowing, like taking the pressure off of having to put everything in one project and being like, it's okay. You can build like two very different fantasy worlds, and that's okay. You don't have to keep making it this one big fantasy world. You can split it off, or you can change it, or you can do rom-com breakup in this book, and you can also do one in this book, and they don't have to be the same, across, even if it's the same genre. Like, that has like taken pressure off of what I think of when I write.
It's interesting. I'm looking at like, to go back a little bit on the plotter thing, I'm looking at Plotter, and it's talking about, it has the bulletin board, and then it has note cards, which is cool, or notes, and then it has here's where your outline, chapter 1, chapter 2, and like, do people think of that as like part of the brainstorming process? Because I feel like I outline after I brainstorm. Anybody? Or is it the same to you?
I think I brainstorm as I'm trying to plot, because like in the beginning, I just don't take that plot very seriously.
Right.
Like, I'll usually pull out like, what's the book called?
Save the Cat.
Save the Cat. I wanted to say Beat the Cat again, and I knew that wasn't right.
Right away.
I'm like, I know that I got that last time, and that was embarrassing. Don't say it again. But it's like, I'll go through that and like look at all the beats and then try to figure out, okay, does this fit here? Maybe it does. So I'll like scoot it in there. Like, I have like a Scrivener doc up with like all of the different beats, what they generally should be. And it doesn't end with everything in order, but like, I'll throw some stuff in there to see like where it works, because it's like, if I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I think this thing that I just thought of might be the incited incident, then I kind of like go through, I'll write it out just a little bit. And then sometimes that jogs like more stuff to come out to be like, okay, maybe this could be the setting, or maybe this could be something here. And then to whoever had said it in the comments earlier, to where it's like, hey, maybe this actually isn't the catalyst. Maybe that is something that happens in Act 2, and this other thing is the catalyst. So it's just a bunch of moving parts around, but it's what kind of gets stuff out of my head and on paper, even to the smallest degree. It helps.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like, I can't do anything with note cards or index cards right away, because it feels like a brain dump. Like, I can sit down. The best thing for me, I think, is to sit down and free write at first, to be like, okay, this is the character. Particularly with the one I'm working on now, I think, because it is I'm used to working on urban fantasies, so the world is often not drastically different. Like with Witches of Ash and Ruin, I had to do some research because it's Ireland. But with this one, it's like a fantasy world. So I am making it from the ground up, and it feels like a lot more work. So in order to like get to the next stage of brainstorming, I feel like I have to sit down and like think of the backstory of the world and brainstorm that. And that feels incredibly intimidating to me. So I'm like, there's no way I'm even getting near cue cards until I have like all of these layers built up, right? And I know where the inciting incident happens on top of all of this past history of the world. It's like,
That's future use problem.
I should just write the book and
Make
ignore
a
all of the
history to
backstory.
match the plot
Oh
later.
my god, can you
Keep it
imagine?
vague, right?
Yeah, keep it vague.
I sent
Who
the first,
needs to
because I
know?
kind of did that as much as I'm like, oh my god, I would never. I did that, and I sent it to my agent, and she sent it back, and she was like, please fix all of this. I don't understand how this magic system works. And I was like, yeah, me neither.
That's a
So,
third draft problem.
yeah, that will be me rewriting the whole book again. That's what we're trying to avoid.
No. We don't
We come
rewrite
full
it. We
circle.
just
You're a bad
shove
influence.
it all in there. Yeah.
See what I'm dealing with this writing group? They're like, just do it.
I think
Enabler.
especially with
Most like
NaNoWriMo.
enabler writing group ever.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think every like writing group is like that gift from New Girl that's like, haha, that's so dumb. Do it.
Do it
Us, one of us every single week.
every week.
Yes.
Hey, you don't know unless you try.
We
Yep.
had a lot of fun.
We do.
It is.
We cause a lot
And
of
we
problems.
do
for
write
ourselves.
books.
We do. I mean, we
Something's
try.
happening.
We're struggling, but we're
Yeah.
doing it, sort of.
Yeah, we come out with books at the end. Are they good books? Who knows? Not us. I do
Time
think
will
that's
tell.
something really important with NaNoWriMo, though, is like, if you're not having fun plotting, you don't have to. If you are feeling stressed because you thought you were going to pants, you can stop and plot out. If you're like, I don't get how this really fits in, who cares? That's a future you problem. If you're having fun doing it, then do it. Like,
Well, and I think one of the fun things about doing chats like this is just hearing how different everyone's approach is. Because I feel like a lot of times it'll like, if you're learning to write, you will like encounter someone who's like, do it this way, do it that way. You know, you have to write every day. You have to plot. You have to and like there are a lot of people who give advice like that. But honestly, I think one of the biggest things about learning to write is like learning what works for you, because different things work for different people. My mayhem approach sometimes works really well for me. And that's just how I like to write. And that's something that like I've tried plotting, and it just like for most of the projects I worked on did not work for me. Works great for a lot of other people, and just like being able to get to a point where you know what's going to work for you, like that's really, really valuable and a really important part of the like learning process. And so, if you can like listen to chats like this and like get a bunch of ideas of things to try and then figure out what works for you, I think that's going to be a lot more valuable than just like latching on like so and so said I had to do it this way, so I'm going to do it this way.
I think it was like, yeah, some of the worst advice in the world, I think, comes from like some of the best writers, like Stephen King, who's like, oh, if you plot, you're a hack. And I'm like, excuse you, sir. Have you read the endings of your own books? Because often they're bad. And I think that, it can work for some people. And clearly he writes a lot of books and he sells a lot of books. But yeah, catch-all advice like that, just being like, oh, if you plot, you're a hack, is like, there's a lot of people that plot and write really good books. So maybe don't.
Yeah. And like different things work for different people, and like that's okay. Kyra's mayhem approach stresses me out watching from the sidelines. I love Kyra's books. Like I read Kyra's books in a day. I love them. I'm glad that approach works for her because I like the end result, even though her approach is so different from my own.
Mm-hmm. I think the best advice, both with brainstorming and writing in general, is like try a bunch of stuff. Like try all different approaches and see like what you enjoy and what works for you and go with that,
I pantsed for a couple of years. It didn't
chaos.
work for me.
I tried it. For
I
one
do
NaNo,
drag Megan down to my level of chaos
I-
when we co-write.
I am required to pants when we co-write. It's not so.
This is not a conversation we've had.
It is.
You want
She's
me
so mean to
couldn't do
me.
it.
Do you want me to start plotting? Do you want to plot the next book, Megan? Maybe we should.
There's too many characters. We can't plot it.
No, we should plot it. We're plotting it now. You've done this to yourself.
See how mean she is to me?
welcome to the co-writing process.
Fight.
We
This is
do have a
exactly what it is every week.
We do have a question from N. Greswold. Do you have any favorite questions to begin brainstorming a new project or to start a brainstorming session? An excellent question. And I always remember advice from Lee Bardugo, it sticks in my head, which is one of the top questions she asks herself every time is who in the world she's creating holds the power? And how does it trickle down from there? Which I think is a really fascinating question when you're building your world. Anybody else have questions they ask themselves?
Mine is usually like, what do these characters want? And or,
Yeah.
like, and not necessarily like if they overtly know what they want, but like what are they struggling with? Like, you know, where are they at? Where do I want them to be at the end of the book? I think is usually where I end up starting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's like really broad because it always like escalates from there. So it's like who, what, when, where, and why. Just start off really vague, and then eventually it's just going to start, you know, blossoming out, and you're going to know more details about what's going on. But just to get it down to like to get that ball rolling is like you need to have some level of those questions answered.
Another question I ask myself is mainly because of the amount of times that I run into issues when I don't ask this is what is the magic and where does it come from? And the second question is often important for me because it's really easy to be like, oh, he waves his wand and abracadabras up, you know, X, Y, and Z. And it's like, cool, but where is the magic coming from? Because if you don't know that, you run into all these questions like, does it run out? You know, do other people have access to that magic? So there's it's like another whole set of world building, honestly. So yeah, that's also that kind of comes down to the where does the power come from question that Lee Bardugo asks every time. So yeah, I guess that is.
Yeah, I think for me, I usually don't start trying to like sit down and brainstorm in earnest until I have a premise, vague starting point, and one or two POVs, not like solidified, but like, oh, I think it's going to be this premise. I think it's probably going to start about here, and this character is going to do this. And for me, the two big things are just like, if I just keep asking why and how, I'll eventually get to something cohesive. Like, oh, she's going to sneak her way onto a baking show. Well, why is she going to do that? Why does she care enough to do it that way? Could she do it some other way? And, you know, if you hone in, you're like, oh, well, she's got to do it that way. Well, then how is she going to do it? And that like opens up your world a little bit. Like, oh, well, she's going to talk to this person and then this is going to happen. Or like, just, you know, just letting your brain go all over the place, following all the possible trails of answers to those questions and just having fun with it. You don't have to go with your first idea. You can make it as weird as you want. In fact, I encourage it to be weirder.
I think also, because I know we're kind of looking to wrap up, we're at the hour. One of the other things, so we did kind of talk a little bit about like finding your process. I think also like being aware that a lot of this might change book to book, especially if you're doing something drastically different. So for me, like I've kind of described what my process most typically is. When I wrote like a 6 POV like heist book, I did I did some plotting for that one. Not super successfully. That book is in a drawer, but like, you know, that was what that book needed. I should have done more probably, maybe then it would be but just also like keeping that in mind too is like along with there not being like one right way for everyone, it's like there's not really one right way for every book either. And sort of assessing your book's needs in terms of what you're going to do for plotting for brainstorming is going to also be really valuable.
Yeah.
Well,
Great thoughts, everybody. All right. Well, yeah, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Actually, very nicely on theme. Jada in the comment says that the question they ask themselves before they start is, how does it end? So something to think about. we're ending the chat here. How does it end? It ends this way. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining us for the first chat of Preptober. We're going to be back again. Same. Megan.
I didn't see the top one and just went, ooh.
Yeah.
October.
We're going to be here same time, same place, Sundays at.
Actually, we'll not be here next week.
Not next week. So we're not going to be here next week.
It's Canadian
Canadian
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Right. We will be here the next Sunday after that, the 16th, for our write-in.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I forgot that it was Thanksgiving. So good reminder. Yes. So we will be here in 2 weeks to do a write-in and get all the brainstorming we did today out and ready for NaNo. So I hope you join us. Yeah. Thank you everybody for being here. We hope you have a nice rest of your night and a good rest of your week, and happy reading and happy writing. Bye.
Bye.